Well, I've been traveling and camping my whole life pretty much whenever I got an opportunity. I was on a road trip or I was camped in lots of different situations, like formal campgrounds and unofficial places, and slept in the car or in tents or under the stars once in a while. My first van life experience actually occurred in 2020. It is not something I've mentioned it before, but I've never really shared any detail about it. Although it is something I think about periodically, given how things turned out for me over the years. So I thought it might be fun to share a little bit of that and some of those reflections on that about how things have changed over 20 plus years now. So, the year 2000 found me going through an unexpected divorce and mostly unemployed. You all probably remember the .com bust that came about in 2000. Well, that was I got caught up in that. I'd been working in software development for a startup software company in Northwest Montana, and like so many other startups and not even just startups, but so many other computer companies, it ended up going away in the year 2000 after the Y2K thing. And by the way, I know that thing was overhyped, and I still hear a lot of confusion about it when it comes up. There were a lot of computer programs that simply were not going to run without being revised when Y2K rolled around, with the year, January 1st, 2000. And ours, the company I worked for, was an example of that. And yes, there was a lot of hysteria and overblown things. But like I said, there's a lot of stuff just wasn't going to run, and it was fairly easy to test that. You just changed your system date on your computer, on your test computer, and you could see what was going to happen with your programs when the year 2000 hit. And so there were a lot of programs, and the reason it wasn't as bad as it could have been, there were some minor problems. But the reason it wasn't a big deal was because a lot of government agencies and businesses spent a ton of money and resources getting software updated. So that was a legit thing. But even though it was arguably overblown and sensationalized at the time, it was a problem that had to be addressed. So that's what I've been doing for work. Ended up out of work and with a whole lot of other people, and I was stuck in that in between thing where I couldn't quite get another computer programming job because there were people with more specialized education and experience than me who were also out of work, and I was every other job I was applying for, I kept coming back because, yeah, you're overqualified. What do you want to work here for? It's like, well, I don't, but I need a job. So I got stuck in that. I was largely unemployed, crazy time in my life, going through divorce, can't find a job, and I ended up living in a 1974 VW bus. Now, this is the only photo I got of this thing, unfortunately. This is back in the day when, we film cameras, and I had this one print of this image, and then it was in a box, and it was involved in a house fire, and I think it was soot stained and everything else, and I scanned it, and I ended up with this. I've left this low resolution image, so it's unfortunately the only picture I have, but at least it's a photo. So, yeah, as I said, I ended up living in this $500 Volkswagen van. And I've basically was bouncing around eastern Washington, Idaho Panhandle, and northwest Montana, applying for jobs in all three states, camping in all three states. Fortunately, there's a lot of great camping up in that area, so that helped. Well, as far as living in a van, that was fairly easy at first. It was summer when that all started, so I mean the heat was an issue, but other than that, it wasn't too cold at night. Didn't have snow and ice to deal with, and it wasn't too hard to adjust at first. I've been camping my whole life, traveling my whole life, so it was a fairly easy. Aside from all of the social issues, it was the logistics of living out of the van were fairly simple. It was just a long camping trip basically. Well, as far as being a digital nomad, which you all know I am these days if you've been following this channel, I was actually at the time in the process of starting my own software business at a program that was in the works. I was starting to get interest on it. I'd been promoting it. It was getting interest, potential customers lined up. And then all of a sudden I was thrust into this thing. I don't think the term digital nomad was even around yet then, but I was suddenly thrust into living in a van and with unable to find a job and with a business that I could no longer maintain because I did not have electricity in the van and I did not have internet. This was mostly dial-up days. I mean, most people didn't have Ethernet, and wireless was just in its infancy, and it wasn't much of a thing. So it's not like it was today. So without electricity and internet, that business just shriveled up and died before I ever got it off the ground, unfortunately. As winter approached, however, living in a van became much more difficult in the Northwest. So I was living in a vintage van, 1974, that was VW, that was not reliable. Fortunately, it was easy to work on when you could get parts. Sometimes parts were a challenge. Fortunately, it was able to work on, but it was often having to be worked on. And of course, being an old VW, it had no heat. I mean, it would trickle out, but it didn't get enough to be meaningful. It was often winter. I'd have to keep a plastic card on the dashboard so I could scrape the inside of the windshield while I was driving because it would continually freeze up while I was driving. And the kids there was a floor vent, a little heater vent in the floor in the back that trickled heat. And so four of them huddled around it with a blanket over them like a tent, make a little teepee or a tent to collect the heat so they could stay somewhat warm while we were driving. Oh, that winter, 2020-21 in the Northwest, we were having lows of 10 degrees consistently. That is cold in a van. I did not have a propane heater or anything. I had no heat at all. Like I said, even when the engine was running, I didn't have heat. No insulation in that van. The windows and doors were drafty. And, what that means is that when it's 10 degrees outside at night, it's 10 degrees inside. So I had a military surplus sleeping bag, and I would bundle up with several layers of clothes, get in a sleeping bag, and it was still cold. I also, like I said, did not have electric in the van to power the laptop, no internet, dial-up days. It was just a really primitive van life experience. Well, van life isn't exactly easy. In any case, I say often that van life is simple but not easy, and I stand by that. I think that's really true. There's just a lot of conveniences we leave behind when we choose to live in a vehicle. Unless you're in a big fancy RV, you lose a lot of the conveniences, so daily tasks are more difficult, but it is simple. Fortunately, it is much easier today than it was 20 plus years ago. There is just no comparison when I think back on my experiences in 2000, 2001, and compared to my experiences now, there's just no comparison. I think there's two main reasons for this. The first is information resources. There are so many websites and blogs and YouTube channels, and almost to the point that sometimes there's so much information it's hard to know what to look at, and not all of it's always great, but there is tons of information. You can see how other people are doing it, and learn from others who have experience with different things. And when you come across a problem, you can figure out somebody who's dealt with a similar problem and see how they solved it. So the information resources are great, and it's one of the reasons I do what I do, to share the things I've learned over the years of living in vehicles and traveling a lot. And now I'm in my 7th year full time in all manner of vehicles, from cars to minivan to full-size vans to a cargo trailer and now a travel trailer. And the van is still set up as a camper van, and I will be traveling in just the van this summer, spring and summer and fall as well too, so I don't have to haul the trailer around on trips where I want to save gas, or if I'm going up to the mountains and it's just too much to drag the trailer up there. Information resources have massively expanded from 20 plus years ago, and the gear and technology has massively improved. Things like wireless internet and smartphones, that was like just about unthinkable. It was a fantasy back more than 20 years ago. Solar and batteries. You can do a DIY system in your rig and actually have electricity. We also have portable power stations like this Blue Eddy unit that I am testing right now. This thing would have been such a game changer back 20 years ago. And then just things like heating. Now, I don't know if the Mr. Heater portable buddies were around back in 2000, or if the Olympians wave series of heaters were around back in 2000. If they were, I didn't know about them. Just being able to have heat when it's really cold, if you choose to or need to camp in very cold places in winter, is amazing. So looking back, my first van life experience in 2000 and 2001 would have been vastly different if I knew then what I know now in terms of knowledge and skills, and if I had access to some of these modern conveniences like electricity in the van, heat in the van, and wireless internet. It's true that I might have been able to address some of these things, like electric to a certain extent. I mean, that's come a long ways, and solar and stuff. I mean, that's just so much better than the price point and the performance is come a long ways in 20 years. Things like heat, I might have been able to figure that out, and maybe even done something of a build in the interior, but I didn't know that was even a thing back then. We didn't have Pinterest to drool over van bills and whatnot, and I didn't even know it was a thing. I know people who camped in vans and stuff over the years. I'd seen that, but I just, as far as a full build and putting in electricity and heat and everything, I didn't know that. I didn't ever cross my mind to do something like that. So these days, fortunately, I have plenty of electricity in the van. Right now I'm in the trailer and I'm plugged into shore power, but I do have plenty of electricity in the van with solar and batteries. And then, of course, I have like this Blue Eddy power station. And internet, I have good access to internet, and so I can work with that combination. I can truly work from anywhere, and I can also do that while being reasonably comfortable. So, for example, right now, as I'm recording this, I am in Wyoming in February. It has been relatively mild for the most part since I arrived back here 2.5 weeks ago. I came back early to help my daughter's recovering from surgery, and I wanted to be here to help her and help with the girls. So that's been great to be able to do that. And that's part of being a nomad, is you do have that flexibility, especially if you're like me, a digital nomad. I can work anywhere. I found out she had to have surgery, and I said, okay, I'm on the way. And a few days later, I was headed north. So it's been relatively mild since I got back. We've had some snow, we've had some freezing weather, but it hasn't been too bad. Well, this week, it's gotten interesting. This morning I woke up to temperatures at 1 degree outside. It's since dropped to -2 midday as I'm recording this. And then we're going down sub-zero tonight and staying very cold tomorrow. And then tomorrow night we're going down to -20 with a wind chill factored in of like -37. So it's cold. I would not be able to do this in the old days, like in just a van with that VW van with no heat, no insulation, or anything. But so far, I'm weathering it pretty good. I left my small electric heater on low overnight, and so it was 1 degree outside this morning and 32 inside. As soon as I got up, I turned the electric heater up on high, and I turned on my Mr. Heater Portable Buddy onto low, which is a 4,000 BTU setting, and I had it up into the 60s pretty quickly, and I actually had to turn off the Mr. Heater because it was getting too hot in here. Of course, I'm dressed warmly too, but so that's we'll see how it goes when it gets down to 20 below. Clearly, leaving the small heater on low will not be adequate for that, so we'll see how that works out. But just like I said, I could not have done this 20 years ago in the VW van with those kind of temperatures. It would have been literally life-threatening. So the trailer is better insulated and less drafty than the VW, of course. The white van's better insulated and less drafty than the VW was. But the trailer is still more comfortable in really cold weather than the van. I'm also better prepared. I have 2 different heat sources set up, and I have a whole stack of blankets on the bed. So I actually woke up this morning because I was too hot and decided to get out of bed, and then realized it was 32 in the trailer. But I had so many blankets on, I was too hot sleeping at 32 degrees. And I have reliable heat sources. I have 2 different heat sources. They're both reliable. I can use one or the other or both if necessary. So that just makes a world of difference. It's a whole different experience than 20 years ago when I had none of that. So reflecting back on my first van life experience is always an interesting exercise, and it always leaves me grateful for the experience I've gained to know how to better handle some of these less than ideal circumstances or environmental conditions, and the improvements in gear and technology that make all of this much, much easier. So what about you? Have you been doing this for any length of time? And if so, what are some of the crazy experiences or changes you've seen over the years that really made things a lot easier for you in this lifestyle? Let me know in the comments. Look forward to seeing what you have to share there. And if you made it this far, did you know I am on Patreon? You might enjoy joining me there. For as little as $1 a month, I post a lot of behind-the-scenes content, things that don't make it out for the general public. as well as some things get there early before they're released for everybody else. So check that out at patreon.com/RobertWitham if you want to know more, or there's a link in the description. Thanks for joining me for this video, everyone. We'll catch you in the next one.